Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is Daniel Thompson. He's the founder of Noma, a company that I've been following closely for some time, so I was really excited to get him on the show. They are providing that stepping stone for people who want to get into the digital nomad world, but just need a little bit of structure for how to do that. And they're also building connection and tribe and community all along the way. I think it's an awesome program, and it was really cool to learn a lot more about the origin story of the company, about Daniel's past, and to see where they're going, because I think they've got some big things ahead of them. We also got into the evolution of digital nomadism and how that works when you start talking about kids and education and even things like investments and stuff like that. So aside from taking a trip around the world with Noma, we also got into some of the practicalities of life and how those things intertwine. Finally, we touched on Belize, a country that he's been calling his home away from home for the last couple years, and why that is such an epic place to go spend some time. So much fun wrapped up into this one. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really think you will as well. Please help me in welcoming Daniel to About Abroad. Yeah, man, I'm here in southern Germany, currently covered in snow. Like the freak snowstorm came through, like unseasonably cold here. And as I just mentioned to you, I'm in my podcast studio, but they cut the power for some reason. Like there's a power outage, so there's no light and no heat. So if you catch me shivering or like doing jumping jacks during the middle of this, don't judge me.
I won't, mate. Well, yeah, pleasure to be on board. Thanks for taking the time to chat to us.
Yeah.
Really excited to dive in and have a chat.
Yeah, well, me too. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. I mean, I've been following your work, all the websites, the social handles, and everything. I kind of live vicariously through you guys. You're doing some pretty epic stuff in the travel and digital nomad space, and so I'm excited to learn a bit more. I'm actually curious. Do you refer to it as like Noma or Noma Collective, or what's like when you're talking with your buddies, like what's the vernacular?
Yeah, we definitely say Noma. I mean, everything gets shortened. I realize sometimes, like when I'm doing my formal emails, that I've got to put the collective on there. But within us and in the community, yeah, Noma family or Noma is what we say.
That's awesome. Where and so Noma, like what's the elevator pitch too? Because I've always I was actually trying to describe this to somebody just recently. I was telling them how I was stoked for this conversation, and they're like, so like what exactly do you do? And I found myself like being able to describe it, but it was taking me a while to get there. And I was like, man, I got to ask Daniel, like how would he say this, or how does he say this? Because I'm sure you can put it much more succinctly than I can.
I'll try. So like, I guess there's kind of two. There's like the long format one, which we can probably get into, but I guess like the elevator pitch would be, we facilitate remote workers with places to stay, friends, and potentially like a little discovery and a journey. So, a group of like-minded professionals traveling the world and being able to do their job. And when they, finish their job at the end of the day, they walk out and they discover the world. And I think the best part of it is that they discover it with a bunch of like-minded remote working professionals. So I really like to kind of look at it like when you go traveling, there was always two ways to do it. It was like you go backpacking or, you go out on a vacation. And backpacking was reserved for the first, 10 years after your university or something like that. And then you got to get a real job. And I think what happened was, and you got to say thanks to COVID, really, like it's kind of crazy, but the ability to maintain your job and then travel is essentially what we now offer, and I don't think it would be possible without COVID. So I guess there's a silver lining there. But yeah, that's what we do. Work, travel, and play.
Yeah, that whole space around like bleisure, like blending business and leisure and maximizing how you use that time is kind of interesting. I think it's like a scary space in a way because it could be, if not, it's one of those things where it's like too much of a good thing could become bad, where people are using their vacation time to continue working. I always think there's some like power in protecting someone from themselves a little bit because we have this tendency, especially like aspirational remote workers who, have worked really hard to get this position. They don't want to lose it. They don't want to lose that flexibility. So I think that's why you see a lot of burnout amongst remote workers, is they have this tendency to overwork in a way, which is kind of funny because a lot of employers are worried that their remote workers won't work, but the data clearly shows people will actually tend to burn themselves out. So I think it's like interesting to see how this blends into a structured program where you have some kind of guards in place a little bit. Like you guys provide itineraries, you're providing the space, you're around a bunch of people who are hopefully living a pretty like balanced life while they're on these journeys. And I think that provides the right environment for people to really learn how to do this, how to travel, how to keep working, be productive, but also tone it down a notch. And then also, of course, see the world, explore, make friends. I mean, it's a pretty awesome concept.
Yeah, I think like for us anyway, the biggest thing that we did, and we did it within like the first 6 weeks, obviously a bit of background, like we started in Belize. We were there on our kind of only in Belize under the name Umaya Village for the first like 9 months. And that was like peak pandemic. We started, I think it was February like 7th, 21. So, that was like, if you want to start a business, people would say probably don't do it then. But weirdly, it was like, as I said, it's one of those just unique moments. But so when we first started, we didn't make it compulsory for you to have a job. And within about 6 weeks, we realized, no, this is something that we need because it's no fault of the people on vacation or the nomads, but it's like this like juxtaposition of like, well, like you've got, these people on vacation and they're naturally going to be around the pool, like drinking at like 2 p.m. on a Wednesday because it's vacation. And then you've got all these like remote workers, like, and they're all human. They want to drink at the pool too. So then suddenly you realize, oh, like we're actually negatively affecting the productivity and it's creating this like negative FOMO. And so when we change to, it's not necessarily a job. We say like you could have a side hustle or a project or something, but something that's getting you, focused and we've had people that like, wanting to take a break and they're in the early stages of designing or building a new business, but that still takes a lot of like, time and space and preparing and things like that. So when we made that change to kind of, well, you have to have something going on, very quickly we saw this like alignment of like, oh, everyone has the right work-life balance, which allowed people to then go, okay, well, like, our calendar also helps that because we don't put something in at 2 p.m. On the weekdays, it's all post-working hours. And then we focus kind of the activities around the weekend. And so I think like also the age of the people, we're averaging around, kind of 30s basically. Like we do go as low as like, I've had people who are 21 who are super cool. Like we had a girl actually from the Ukraine who was like 22 and she'd left the Ukraine because of the war. And she was like just looking to, do some remote work. She had a startup she was doing. I was like, man, this is the most together like 21-year-old that I know. And then on the other end too, we have, older people. We had, in our last Belize trip, we had 4 people who were over 50, but it's not necessarily the age. It's just about the type of person and what they're doing and what they can bring to the community. But with that kind of like movement towards, towards the correct work-life balance, we have found that everyone's super respectful of each other's time, and it kind of makes for a good dynamic.
Yeah, I bet it's a pretty sweet dynamic. I mean, if you get a bunch of people that are in a similar circumstance in their life and you put them in an amazing place and give them a little bit of structure, you find like you guys plan all these activities and excursions and stuff, which is awesome. I think kind of like a cherry on top. But like that, the organic community that forms is, at least from what I've seen when I've participated in things like this, is just incredibly powerful. And I think there's so much to be said for just giving people the space to have that facilitate. I mean, that's why people go on these excursions, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I guess something that we're aware of, and I think there's a really fine line, is like, you don't want it to be too scripted and curated and forced, right? Like, so there's a way to go too far that way. And so I always say, like, we definitely have a heavy emphasis on community. And I think that's something that is kind of across all of the people in our space. So like, that's why people are coming together. But I think what we do different than others is, I call it like the highly curated but optional calendar. So you can be as involved or not as you choose. Like, and most people, when they're coming on these trips, like, they're already looking for that. They want that. So they're as active as I think they should be. And it makes sense. Within reason, obviously some people have, work commitments, but even having said that, we are pretty flexible. We'll have weekly, kind of meetings with the crew who are on site and be like, hey, if the yoga classes at this time aren't working because most people are on like Eastern hours and we're in Kenya, let's move it, right? Like we're not worried about that. We want everyone to, to enjoy the activities and the excursions and the offerings that we have. So I think that's something that sets us apart, I think, from other companies, is the ability to make in-game changes and kind of have this flexibility while also having something every day if you wanted, and kind of more work and fitness focused in the week. And then kind of as we get into the weekend, some more kind of fun and games and like, bars, restaurants, activities that sometimes take more than just like a couple of hours. The excursions do change dramatically, right? Like Buenos Aires would be very different to Belize, right? Belize, obviously more nature focused. Buenos Aires is probably our most like party destination. I lived there for many years, so I'm like a massive fan of Buenos Aires. It's the city that actually doesn't sleep. You can get a steak at 5 a.m. It's a madness, that place. So
it's one of the best cities in the world. I mean, it's not like it's
Have you been?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's some like hidden gem, but it's also not like the, I don't know, like it may not be one of those like top 5 or 10 places where people make their way to when they're like starting on, start checking places off their bucket list, and they should. That is a vibrant place, man. I love it. I'm jealous you got to live there.
Yeah, I mean, I would still be living there if it wasn't for the tough economic situation there.
Yeah.
They deal with massive, like, I mean, I guess you can call it hyperinflation. I don't know, like, I mean, I remember when I moved there in like 2012, an empanada was 3 pesos, and now. Last time I was there, I think it was like 300 pesos for an empanada. And like, it was like 1 to 7 the dollar when I first went there. And now I think it's 1 to like 200 or 220 or something. It fluctuates quite a lot. But yeah, so, I mean, that's my measurement is how much is an empanada? How many pesos is an empanada?
I want to always live by the empanada scale, just like how many empanadas is that? And that works for me.
It's a good scale, man.
It
works, man. I mean, it's like every night I go back and that's my first thing. I go check on okay, how much is it? Right. Well, there you know how good or bad it's going to be. But no, Buenos Aires is an awesome place for nomads. I mean, speaking about like the ability to, have like, I guess it's like, geographical arbitrage. I think you spoke about that in some previous podcasts. That's why all these places like that are opening up the visas for digital nomads, because it's still, good money coming into the country. They're spending it, in the country. And so I think it's positive. But yeah, Buenos Aires is dope. I have a lot of time for it. My wife's actually from Uruguay as well. So we always get to go back there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And where are you from, actually? I have no idea, actually.
So I was born in London. My dad is half English, half New Zealander, and my mum is from the UK. But I was working it out. I've almost spent more time outside of the UK than I have inside of the UK. I lived in the States for a while when I was a teenager. I went to university in Orange County, in California. Yeah, and then and now I'm in Merida, Yucatan is where I'm at right now, in Mexico.
Right. Is that like home, or like now? I mean, do you like live there, or are you just kind of passing through, or what's the deal?
So home is technically Belize, but I would say that I am a nomad. I mean, like, it's funny, actually, like my grandma used to say to me, like, Dan, you can't spend your whole life as a nomad. And then I think she'd be looking down at me now being like, well, you've actually done it, mate. Well done. You now have a nomad business. But I think, it just goes to show, it's like, the generational change between even my parents or our parents and us is just like, it's a full, it's a 180. Like, what once was completely, not possible is now even like, prompted and promoted. We were talking about just before we got onto press record, was that like, when I was a kid, you were like, don't leave your job, and if there's a gap in your resume, you won't get another job. And I think that stopped, probably millions of people making that jump. Even in 2011, when I first became remote, that was something that people said to me, be careful, it might be tough to get a job again, and now I think the best thing that's come out of this is that, you don't have to let go of your job to go and explore the world. And like exploring the world has given me so much perspective. I can't wait to show that to my little boy. So roundabout answer of where I live is I'm technically in Belize, but we came to Merida just up the coast because my little boy, Luciano, was born a month ago. And so we came here for the hospital. That's a little bit more of a kind of infrastructure here.
Gotcha.
So I'm here for 6 months. We came for 3 months before and 3 months after, just to kind of nest and then relax post. And then we'll be heading back to Belize in the new year.
Funny, man. Some interesting parallels, not on the child front, which congrats, by the way. That's got to be exciting. And we're got to circle back to this because that changes the nomad game a little bit. And I'm curious to know how you're going to navigate that. But like I'm also right now, like I technically live in Spain, but I'm about 6 months into a stay up in like Central Europe around the Alps area, and currently in Germany. And I think having that flexibility, like in your case, it's much more tangible, much more like real life, scenario where it actually makes a difference. In my case, I just like wanted a change of scenery and needed something different for a little while. But there's so much value in that. Like one of the things that I think goes beyond just the perk of remote work and being able to travel and stuff is like actually getting to change up your scenario of life to better fit whatever it is that you need in that moment. And that can go from like one end of the spectrum, which I think is my case, where it's just like, hey, I need a change, or I'd like a change. Need probably is hyperbole. Like, oh, I just want to change. This would be nice. And then there's other people I know that have like been able to relocate because, their grandfather was dying and they wanted to be close to them, or they met someone who was from another country and that person couldn't immigrate to them, but they were able to immigrate to there, and because they had remote work and they could, therefore have this relationship that they wanted. So, and then there's like everything in between. And I think that stuff's so cool. And like, it kind of goes unspoken because, we're just like all excited about the travel part or the opportunity. And like, there's all this stuff in between that it is, I guess just a little bit under the radar, but also very, very powerful. And then there's people like yourself who are like living in a beautiful place, but needed to go somewhere else for the birth of the son and everything. So you were able to do that because of this flexibility. So I don't know, it's a little tangent, but I think it's kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, I think like the way I see it, I think the nail you're touching or hitting on the head is like, what do you do once you know that you can do this? Like that this life is tangible. Because I think what most people do when they come on these trips is they think, I'll do a month and then, I'll go back to my normal life. And I see this time and time again, not so much now that I'm not on site, but when I was on site in Belize, people would come and we were doing a rolling date format. So people could come and leave as they please. So you always had this constant flow of people rather than a lot of our trips are also kind of a fixed date, just depending on the location. So, but we would find that, week one, all fun and games, like vacation almost. Week two, it's like, oh, I could actually do this. And then kind of week three, I would see these people kind of like staring out into the sunset on the beach, like really thinking about their life. Like, what am I going to go back to the apartment in New York or anywhere for that matter in the States? And am I going to sit on my couch for the next year again? Is that what I'm doing? And so once that like door is opened or cat out of the bag, I think it's hard to get it back in there. And then that's when the things that you're speaking about start to come into play. Okay, well, I don't have to live where I work, right? Well, then where can I live? Do I move to where my lover is? Do I move, where I want to learn a language? Do I move to a place where I can make my money go further for me, which I think is something that is really important. Like, if your lifestyle, the type of lifestyle you want and the place where you work versus the place where you can live are different, like that's unique and new. And we should be able to take advantage of that because living within your means is one of the key parts to being a successful nomad. Though I think stepping away from that material lifestyle that we've all grown accustomed to and taking on a little bit more of a minimalist lifestyle and perhaps focusing on the things that make you happy, like the food you eat or the friends that you make or whatever it may be. I think that's the stage 2 is where I think a lot of people are getting to right now. And I think to kind of pull it full circle to Noma, I think Noma is a stepping stone for a lot of people. It makes it doable because there's a lot of fear and it's totally warranted. It's okay, I've done a couple vacays and I've done, with the family, that's very different, and so this allows you to go, okay, well, I'll be able to keep my job because I know these guys can deliver on the Wi-Fi and the working spaces and I be picked up from the airport. So I know that, all of the worries of not learning the language or any of those things are all covered. And so, yeah, it starts to make it possible. I say, and I'm pretty sure about this, but I would say 90% of the people that can do these trips don't even know they can do these trips. I think that's how untouched this market is still. I truly believe that. Most people are still just either sitting at home doing what they were doing since COVID, or maybe they don't even have the remote work job yet. But yeah, I think that there's the biggest kind of thing we're working on is letting these people know it's even a thing that they can do.
Yeah. The way you put it as a stepping stone is very real to me. I see a lot of people that just need the bit of confidence to say, okay, I can take the laptop with me and do this from somewhere else and still get my work done and enjoy seeing the world. And then you mentioning, I visualize this person that you're talking about in week 3, who's looking off to the sunset and imagining what do I do after this? I can't go back to what I was doing before. And that's the reality, right? I don't know. Actually, I want to ask you a little bit about your story, what you did before this, because I find for a lot of people that are in the types of positions you and I are in now, where we're able to incorporate this need to explore with our work and do it sustainably over time, there was something in between there. For me, I had this career before where I was working remotely, but I wasn't location independent. I couldn't travel wherever I wanted. I couldn't just take the laptop and go. And I had to be taught that I could do that. It was possible. And that breakthrough was huge. I mean, it changed my entire life. The whole trajectory of my life changed once that was opened up to me. So yeah, I don't know. I would love to hear a little bit about what'd you do before this that led you to creating Noma?
Yeah, for sure, man. So, I mean, I think even a step back from that, I had a very unique childhood. My dad is a singer and he was traveling the world anyway. And so I was lucky enough to kind of see different parts of Europe and the world with him. And so I think, and I think about it so much because I'm now a father and how I can impart this knowledge onto my kid. But just the perspective as a youngster, seeing different cultures, I think allows you to go, okay, there's many ways to do this. There's a million ways you can do this. And so, I was, traveling, back and forth from the States a bunch when I was a kid, and I was doing unaccompanied minor stuff on the planes, when you had endless Coca-Colas and building forts in the disabled bathrooms. I think I didn't quite realize how lucky I was at that point, but I definitely think that was the start. It was seeing different ways of living and going, oh, and that creates this what if. And it's the what if leads me always to make the jump. And it's a 2-part. It's what if I go, all these cool things that could happen. But the even more powerful one for me is, what if I don't go? I'll be constantly thinking about what would have happened if I had gone. And so for me, that's always pushed me to go do the jump, because you can always come back. I think people get scared of the if it doesn't work out, worst case, you just come back.
Yeah, that's it.
I think it's a quandary in the mind. I think it's almost how do you explain it? It's like a mind playing trick. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's for sure. I'm sure it's been baked into us, but it's like a mind trick. You're there going, oh, I couldn't possibly. And so when I did finally make the jump, I the way I kind of sorted it in my head was I was like, I went traveling because I used to work in the music industry because I followed my dad. I worked with my long-term partner, who's one of the founders, Jack Robinson. He runs a bunch of music festivals in Europe and in the UK. And we started up right at the birth of dubstep when it was really kind of nascent and before it turned into like Skrillex and kind of all the noise. We were running a night called Some Night, which is Sound of Music Evolution stood for. And it was every Wednesday for like about 3 years. And it was kind of the weekly event in London for dub and dubstep music. And so that was like what I was doing when I was working in festivals, and I got burnt out by the industry. Honestly, I remember the moment so clearly. I was doing the nights doing that, and then I was working for a company, which is my mum's company called Charm Factory, which is a music PR company. And I was in a meeting for the artist called Kesha. I don't know if you've heard of her. And they were like, we've got it covered. The radio's done, like the video's done, like it's going to be a number one. It's sorted. They didn't say like we've paid everyone, because it's not like that. They were just like, it's covered. Like we've got all the syncs. We've got everything we need. This is going to be a number one. And I was just like, oh man, like this is like not where I want to be at all. This is like, it's like it's rigged almost, which most businesses are. And so it made me take the jump to go traveling, and then I focused on learning a language. I was like, okay, well, this isn't a use. This is like I'm using the time well because I'm learning a language. And so that was my trick to myself to go live in Argentina. I was like, well, worst case scenario, I come out of it with a language. That was how I looked at it. And then once I started living there, it just fascinated me. And that was like, well, then I could live for cheaper. I had a better lifestyle. I kept going back to the UK and being like, everyone's just doing the same thing. I mean, everyone says that, right? If you leave your country, you go back to your town. I mean, it's not even a town. London's huge. But it's just, there isn't really any changes. And so meanwhile, I've had this like amazing changes in my life and these like revelations and epiphanies and all these things that I feel have made me a different person. And so that kind of like was the main catalyst. It's like, oh, I could do this. Like, I could probably have as many epiphanies as I want based on the unique things I see in the world and the different ways to live. And I mean, and I don't know when, but I have this same vision of India and Pakistan and that area. Like I haven't been there yet, but I know going there with all of its history and just like, mystique and like, I'm imagining you will get that no matter where you go in life. Right. So I guess that's what like led me to this. But realistically, I was working on a hotel project that was kind of more like a Selena, a kind of comfort. It's like the comfort of like a hotel that you went to with your parents, but like the vibe of a hostel that you went when you're backpacking. But like you don't want the bunk bed anymore. You want the comfy bed, but like you want the vibe. Like those hotels where like the hotel bar is like there's like a pilot and like an old dude, and like that's it. You don't really get that like vibe. And so I was thinking for some time, and also Jack and myself were like, we don't want to be continually doing late night events and festivals when we're like older, but we want to continue creating this community. Because in reality, what I've been doing since I was 19 is creating platforms for people to release and meet people and vibe. And originally it was just forget about your weekday. And now it's like, hey, you don't ever have to do that weekday again. So we're just like trajectory just moving that way. It went from like one night to a weekend festival to a week festival. And now we're doing these month trips. So when I look back on it, there's a clear pathway. Obviously, when you're in the eye of the storm, it doesn't quite feel like that. But when I moved to Belize, having never seen or been to Belize, but I just was like, I got the opportunity to make the jump. I was finishing some work. I'd been working on this project in Uruguay. The place fell through, but we still had the investors. And so I was like in a rare position where it's normally the other way around. You normally have the place and the investors fall through, but it was like, no, the place fell through and we had the money and we're like, okay, where can we do this? The guy who was going to put the money in was like, come to Belize. So we were like, I basically Googled Belize and saw a bunch of palm trees and beautiful sun and sand. And I mean, I knew of it, but I knew of it more from like other things like, TV shows, McAfee. I don't know if you know that guy.
That documentary on him was amazing.
Yeah, it's also not like the best view of Belize,
right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which, it does have that side, but there's so much more to it. So much beautiful people, pristine beach, just lovely, lovely place. So Anyway, we moved to Belize, and then 3 months later, the pandemic hit. And so instantly my entire life's work, so everything I'd done was deemed non-essential, like whatever it was, like the 15th of March or 17th of March. Because obviously large crowds of people didn't work for COVID, right? So yeah, I was with my wife, and we were locked down. Thankfully for Belize, it was pretty minimal. We had sun, and so I felt blessed, and I just time to think. And then we were sitting there, and we were going, hey man, all these hotels are empty. This is like the once in a lifetime unique experience to trial some sort of new idea. And one of the founders, a guy called Will, kind of was like, I want to push forward this remote work angle. And he had done a kind of remote work village in a chateau in France the summer before, just like a pop-up. And so that was what, all those Selena-esque hotels had a focus on nomads and remote work. This was like, oh, well, this clearly is going to be something that's bigger than what we thought. So we rolled the dice, and within like a month we had March and April full, and we're like, oh, okay, this is something that people really want to do. So yeah, that's kind of the long-winded story of how I got to Noma.
It's an epic story. I'm glad you shared it. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my good friends over at Greenback Tax. As an American citizen, I'm from one of only 2 countries in the entire world that requires I pay taxes on my global income, regardless of which country I'm actually living in. So when I started my expat journey back in 2015, I knew my tax situation was about to get complicated. Fortunately, I discovered Greenback, and I've never looked back. Greenback is 100% focused on helping U.S. expats with their tax situation, and to date, they've filed almost 50,000 returns for nearly 15,000 happy customers from more than 200 different countries. After 7 years working together, I can say with confidence that they make one of the most painful parts of life abroad an absolute breeze with their automated systems, friendly advisors, and expertise in the very specific niche of U.S. expat taxes. Also, for those of you who may have fallen behind on your taxes or you're trying to get ahead of tax season in 2023, Greenback has your back here as well. They can assist with late filings to ensure you don't encounter any problems with the IRS and to make sure you start 2023 off right. Tax season is on the horizon. Learn more about Greenback today by going to greenbacktaxservices.com via the link in the show notes. Hey guys, if you're still around and enjoying this episode, then I think you might actually like our once a month newsletter as well. If you'd like to sign up, just open up the show notes of the episode you're currently listening to, scroll down, and look for aboutabroad.com/newsletter. It takes about 30 seconds to sign up. It's a fantastic way to support the show, and I think you'll be pleased with the information that we provide every month as well. Thanks a lot for listening. Hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Let me ask you this. Where are you in Belize? Like, are you out on the Keys or are you on the mainland?
Yeah, so I live in Placencia, and that's because that's where Umaya was and where my friend, he built Umaya. So Placencia is in the south. It's not a key. It's actually a peninsula. It's unbelievably awesome, like topographically super unique. It's like a really long, thin, almost. I mean, it's basically a spit. There's like a river comes down from the Mayan Mountains it's called the Coxcomb Basin, and it basically the silt over hundreds of years, maybe probably I'd say it's hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, has come down that river mouth and created this peninsula. It's basically just river sand that created it. And so you've got this crazy juxtaposition of like, on one side is these beautiful Mayan mountains, and they call it the lagoon, but it's not a lagoon. It's like, it has an exit, but it's like calm and it's mixed with river water. So you've got this kind of calm lagoon-esque with a backdrop of the mountains, of the clouds kind of ever changing, which kind of changes the view every day. And then on the other side, which is like 50 meters, you can just like literally run from one side to another in like a minute. You've got the Caribbean like beach with the islands that you can see. You've got False Key, which you can kayak to from Umaya. So it's like you've got this beautiful landscape, and it's long and thin. So you've got Placencia Village at the bottom, which is like about 20 minutes from the hotel. It's about 15, 20 miles long. Maybe it might be kilometers. I might be wrong on that, but essentially long enough to go down. And in the middle is Sainbite, which is the local, or like a local fisherman's village, Garifuna people they've been there the longest. They've been there like 300 years. And that's where we do our social impact program with the local community. And then we're in Maya Beach, which is the closest to like the connection of the land. So those are the three main areas within the peninsula. And yeah, it's about, you take a hopper flight. So it's about 25 minutes on a flight from Belize City, or 3 hours in the car along some pretty crazy windy roads. One of them is, it's insane. One of them is called the Hummingbird Highway. And it is, I think it's the most beautiful road I've ever been on. Like it's very similar to some roads I've seen in Thailand or in like Peru near Machu Picchu, but it's got like these really high mountains, but like really steep descents. So you're going through these canyons and they're all like, covered with, jungle, like tropical jungle. And like there's a lot of mysticism. Some of them, there's one that's like has like a magnetic force that you can't fly drones around because they just like it just eats drones.
What?
And yeah, dude,
what do they attribute that to?
I mean, I guess some sort of magnetic minerals or stones. I mean, you've lost me on that one.
I think it's a Mayan curse. I think it's like some, like, we're not having drones fly through here. Like, we know what you guys, we got the Mayan calendar. We know what's happening in the future. You guys drop your drones outside.
It's insane though, man. Like, it even happened to us. The drone stopped working when we were filming around it. Like, but it's like, it's well known. People are like, no, just don't bother, dude. You'll lose your drone. It just like flies off into the mountain and you never see it again. But yeah, so Belize, Belize is pretty small. Most, like 80% of the tourism goes to the islands, goes to like Ambergris Caye, San Pedro, and then Caye Caulker. And then the rest is split between like the rest of Belize, which is pretty sparsely populated. Belize has 400,000 people in total. In the whole country. The biggest population like in one space is Belize City, and it's 60,000 people. So it's like, yeah,
that's wild.
So Sensi has 2,000 people.
I didn't realize it was so sparsely populated. Actually, I've been there once, and actually had like one of the most surprising trips I've ever been on. Like, just I didn't have like a ton of preconceived notions about what I was going to be doing in Belize. I went there. I won't tell the whole story. It's not that interesting, though. It does kind of overlap a little bit with yours in that I was interested in a property down there and kind of used that as an excuse to go finally check out Belize. And anyway, when I went out to Caye Caulker, actually, I loved the go slow mentality, and it's a pretty sweet place. I know it's like a little bit maybe overrun by nomads, but I think there's a cool blend there between the locals and the nomad, vibe or whatever. I feel like it mixed pretty well. At least then, this was several years ago. But yeah, I mean, I had such an epic trip because I just didn't realize the diversity was so insane. Like, I was out there on Caye Caulker, like looking at some of the most beautiful water I've ever seen. All these, like hotels and stuff with like swings sitting out in the water and beach bars and just a really fun, lively vibe. But at the same time, like you see go slow everywhere on the island, and everybody's just kind of like got this chill mentality. There's no cars. There's just, just golf carts or bikes. And I loved that.
No one's wearing shoes.
Yeah, no one's wearing shoes. Definitely a pretty strong hippie vibe. And I loved it. Like, it was awesome. And then, like, we just through this like series of events ended up going on an excursion back to the mainland and going to see these like Mayan temples deep in the rainforest, and got to experience some of the mainland. And you're just like, this is crazy. It's this tiny country that I really don't know that much about. Like, I know a lot more about like Thailand than I do about Belize, and I'm from the US, and like at the same time there's just so much to explore, and so I don't know, that juxtaposition was really interesting, and I had a blast. Like, it's one of those trips where you just look back on it with like super fond memories, and I also really like Belize because maybe you can elaborate on this. Like, it's so open in terms of like they really want people to come in, like it's open to foreigners. It's a great place for people to go, and like whether you want to stay for a month or years, like there's a path to that, which isn't always the case. So,
oh yeah, 100%. I mean, beautiful people. There's no like majority almost. Like, they have like, there's like, it's such a crazy mix of people from like, Creole to Garifuna to like Chinese to Mennonites to expats. Like, it's insane, man. Like, it really is. And I think there's just something to be said about the people. Like, whenever you chat to anyone, it's like, what's the best thing about Belize? People always say, oh, the beautiful blue water, or no, it's the people. The people is the best thing because they are just so open and welcoming. And as you said it, they really want you to be there. And I think that's so important when you go to another place. And I think it kind of leads me into like one of the things that I wanted to speak about, which is the social impact side of what we do. Because I think, as travelers coming from, developed nations, I think we really have a responsibility to be sustainable and to, try and give back as much as possible and be aware of like, the reality of how these people live. And I think like, there's a lot to be said about our generation moving towards that, but I think there's still a long way to go. And so if you don't mind, I'll tell you a little bit about the social impact program that kind of was born out of just, the relationship that we have with the Garifuna community in Samebite.
Yeah, please, okay, man. I was going to ask about it anyway, so I'm glad you bring it up.
So we just started playing like volleyball with these guys. Like I met this guy called Kerwin, and he used to be like, I guess when he was 13, he was like, in a really tough time. He was like, got into the bad stuff, was selling drugs, and he had this like, moment in his life where he was, he was able to break free from that and turn his life around. And he's now basically runs, like with a lot of help from other people, the main kind of outside of school activities. It's very ad hoc. Like they call him Doc, and he's just there every day, and they play ball games or they do whatever, arts and crafts and stuff. And so my wife when we started doing Noma, probably about halfway through like 2021, was like, I think I want to start, going to do some stuff with these kids. Why don't we just do something where, if the nomads want to come, they can, kind of like very, very loose, but relaxed, and just see what happens. And so every Thursday for a couple of hours, we would do arts and crafts with the little kids and ball games with the older kids. And it was like in the local town, there's like a kind of like community center. And we would go there and we would supply some snacks and some water, because a lot of these kids only have like one meal a day. And we would also, bring all of the stationery and bits and bobs that you would need to kind of have a cool arts and crafts moment. And then, new footballs and basketballs, because they would go through them like insane. They would just play that ball for like 3 weeks and then it would just break. And so we started doing it very much like, when the nomads were there, just to give some kind of understanding, we're not in Belize all year round. So we come in and out. And I think what I started to realize is that like, it's amazing, going there and spending the time with the kids and having, just listening to them, because they just want to ask questions, so nomads would come and they'd ask all these types of questions. But what you realize is that like they need stability more than anything. And so like coming in and out is good if you have nothing else. But really what we took away from the year doing it is, if we're going to do it, we need to do it, and it needs to be regular. It needs to be like, at least we need to be able to commit to a year. Now, up until we got this grant, which I'll explain in a sec, it was basically just Evelyn and myself and the odd nomad putting in like some money when we asked for it, but basically just kind of doing it, because we wanted to. And we really noticed that the kids suffered when we left. Like, we had to come to Mexico, and so we weren't able to continue for like a couple months. And so very serendipitously, my old friend in Argentina, he started working with On-Chain Monkey, OCM for short, and you may have seen them if you're into NFTs, like the monkey heads. But anyway, they have a DAO which they've set up, which is specifically focused around giving grants on social impact. And so they had a round of grants in November, and we pitched to one. It was for about $4,000. It was in ETH, but it was around $4,000, and we won it. And so that's allowing us to, for the entire of 2023, we're going to do 52 classes with the kids, so one every week. And we're also going to do 12 beach cleanups, so once a month. So super stoked. Thank you to OCM for hooking that up, because they're really awesome and they've been supporting us 100%. And hopefully when we deliver this, we can now like roll that out across all of the other locations that we have. And then we start to, see real solid, I wouldn't say change, because I don't want to sound like, that we're making a massive change. But even if we can deliver that continuously, then that's a place for them to go once a week, learn arts and crafts and have contact with the nomads when they're there. And then also we're connecting with all the hotels in Placencia to send people who want to volunteer when the nomads aren't there.
I love this on so many levels. I'm probably going to forget to mention some of them because as you're talking, I'm just like, my eyes are wide open and my jaw's dropped. I'm loving it. Because there's so many things here. So like one, I think we always talk about, when we talk about like the positive impact that digital nomads can have on, it usually comes back to like the local economy, right? Like it's geo arbitrage. You're bringing in foreign income and investing it in the local economy. And that's normally good until you reach the point of gentrification. And then there's like a diminishing return there. But normally it's a pretty good thing for a lot of areas that are trying to attract this. But there's another element to that, in that like, what's the right word? Like that investment that these communities are getting. And I think it comes in like multiple levels. It's shown here through this program. So like, for example, I think one of the greatest things that you're giving those kids is probably a new ceiling. Like they're seeing what their ceiling is instead of what they may perceive it to be if they were just there. They're interacting with people who are coming in from other parts of the world that are earning an income online, that have built lives for themselves, built businesses, and they're absorbing that information. And that changes what they think they could do. My wife did a social impact project in Jamaica years ago, and she was working with a school there, and it made her really sad because basically all the kids, like the most aspirational ones, their jobs that they really wanted to have when they grew up was to be a taxi driver. And they were like that was the most aspirational. Like some kids had no aspirations, they didn't know what they wanted to do or whatever, but the absolute best job that they could imagine was being a taxi driver, which there's nothing wrong with that. But she was like, God, I wish we could inspire them to want to do something else, like anything else that could go above and beyond that. And I think that's probably something that these kids are picking up on throughout these interactions. So I think that element really calls to me and probably flies under the radar.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's the potential of where that can go, right? So it's like, it's kind of the flip side of what I was saying about the perspective that I got when I went to other places. It's like, okay, we can't take these kids to other places yet, but we can bring people with those perspectives to them. And I think that's really awesome. And you realize that like these kids are lacking basic skills, like I had an experience at an ATM when, I was waiting in line, and I was like, this kid was looking at me. He was about 18, I guess. And I was like, what is he looking at me for? And he was like, I thought I instantly, my mind went to something shady. And then he came to me and he was like, hey, like, I've never used one of these before. I need to get $187 out. And I was like, there's so many things to unpack there. It's like, you've never used one. You don't understand how they work, that it comes out with multiples of 20, let's say. And it was just like, that really showed me like, oh wow, there is a lot to be done here. Like just basic things like that. Or like I was at a swimming pool once, or like at a hotel that had a swimming pool, and this kid's, it was her first time ever like coming to a swimming pool, and she just walked in and couldn't swim and just walked down the stairs, and we all jumped in because she just didn't had not even a concept of like of what drowning would be. And you're like, okay, it's like, I initially was thinking, oh, let's teach them how to write resumes. Let's do all the thing. And then I was like, no, it needs to be just a step back. We need to get like the basics. We need to go. So I think like the way we structure it is just like they're inquisitive, let them ask questions. And then my hope is that as we develop this program, that we can kind of set up like a mentorship of sorts, by where alumni who are interested and want to continue the relationship post the trip, and then a kid, like let's say we have a photographer who's really good and we have a kid who wants to learn photography. It's like the barrier to entry for that kid is twofold. One, it's the camera that he needs, which we could help out with it. Once we move a little bit further, we're gonna probably add like $100 or $50 onto each sale that will go into a fund that we can then like use to spend on like a camera for a kid. And it not just like, here's a camera, but it'd be like if a kid shows that they are really interested and they have this goal, we'd want to be able to mentor them as much as possible within the network that we have. And so I think that like we talk a lot about in the nomad space, the network, the value add of the network. And I think like there's two ways that can be used. There's the network within the nomads, which is super important. People, they want to know that, hey, Noma isn't just like a trip company. It's like an alumni, the way in which I see like a Harvard alumni, except you don't have to have gone to a school like that. You just need to have a remote work job and be a nice person and come and vibe. And that opens you up to a cool network. But like, to just kind of close on the social impact part of it, it's like that network, we should be trying to get that network out to the local communities as well, so that they can start to, I would just be so happy if in 3 years time, we've got 3 or 4 kids from different places in the world that are going to doing internships in like New York, for example. Like that would be just like the win of wins, right? Like, so that's kind of how I see that going. And hey, there's a lot that we need to do between the 1 week, activities that we're doing and being able to get a kid to an internship, but there is a pathway there.
Who knows, man? Maybe they'll end up, working for Noma and traveling the world and little entrepreneurs or remote workers. I mean,
it would be amazing.
Who knows?
I like you brought up a cool point, but like, not quite similar, but kind of, it's not with the like local kids, but, kind of the biggest success story of Noma that I always kind of talk about is a guy called DC. Shout out DC when you listen to this. He works for me now, works with us. He's one of our like vetting agents. And he was a Navy vet and had a bunch of PTSD. He had a traditional, he had his house and a job that was remote. He came to, when it was Umayyah Village, I think it was like August 21. And he, like, week 1, same as I said, week 2, like he was the first person I saw on the beach, like what I was telling you about, like really starting to kind of like think about life, like what. And he said to me, Dan, he's like, I haven't had, he woke up with nightmares for like, I don't know how many years. He said, Dan, I've been here, haven't had a nightmare in like 2 weeks. Like, this is insane. Like I'm like really feeling this difference, right? Like, and he's like, I think I'm just gonna sell my car and put my house up for rent and just travel the world. And he's now been traveling for like, I get what are we, almost 18 months. And he's working with us now, and he's like, just like, just a new lease of life. And that's what we're doing. That's the key right there, is like, can we be the stepping stone for those people and then like continue with them on their journey as it changes and progresses? If it's like, I understand that people might want to, come on a trip every couple months. They might want to do their own thing. I have visions of like, how Noma will develop and we'll have like Noma residences where they have all of the amenities, but without the community aspect, smaller houses. So, you can go there, because I understand people may not want a community all year round, but there's definitely this like, how can we grow with you on your nomad journey? So yeah, it's super exciting.
That's the next phase for Noma. I'm also curious about the next phase for you. Like, the game has changed a little bit. The nomad tribe has grown with the little ones.
One bigger. Yeah.
You guys did a 50% increase there. So what's the plan for the future now? Like, well, I won't lead you anywhere. I'm curious.
Yeah, man. So I think this is the biggest question in the nomad game right now, honestly. And I don't think anyone's fully figured it out, but I've seen some really cool things happening. And I think that there is definitely going to be a change in the way families, or the option for families to be more nomadic if they choose. Like there is a couple of, there's a company called Boundless Life. They're doing this in a couple locations. They have an educational program wrapped around like kind of what a nomad program we're doing. And we're actually looking at doing our first Noma family trip, kind of summer next year. We won't run into an educational program straight away because there's a lot of moving parts to that, but we're going to definitely do kind of more of like a daycare or like a summer camp angle. But, to speak about it in broader terms, I think that like, I look at everything as a journey, right? It's like, we're now slotting in to the middle of someone's journey. We're kind of helping them on the first bit, but they've already got a remote work job. And we can get into that too in a bit, like, help, we get people asking us all the time, this looks amazing. How do I get a remote work job? How do I make the jump? Like, that's a big part of the business too, like helping the on-ramp of people. Because I think there's a lot of people that just don't know where to begin. And so there's a little bit I want to talk about that afterwards as well. But if you look at it, there's this journey. It's like, you go through school, and then providing that your parents aren't nomad, you're doing that traditionally. You break free, you go to uni or not, you get a job, you come with us. We're then there with you. and you're most likely you're a solo nomad, or maybe you're a couple. We get about 30% couples. And we also get nomads who are in a couple, but one can't go remote. And so they just have a trip and they come, and then their other half will come visit them for maybe a week or something like that. But the majority are singles, right? And so you look at that, it's like your entire target market in the next 10 years is probably going to get married and have kids, right? And so I think that, and I'll probably go, it's like what your friend Gonzalo said from Nomad X. It's like, we're going to have to build it because it isn't there yet. And so it's super exciting, because how does that look? I think there's some schools that are doing some really cool stuff. So the Green School is a really cool company. I know that Elon Musk put in some money for this thing called Synthesis, which is like an online supplemental course that you can do if you feel like your kids aren't getting some of the life lessons that they would get from traditional schooling. I mean, to touch on I almost slipped through the cracks in schooling. Like, I have dyslexia. Like, I was diagnosed with ADD, but I read through my reports and they're like, so much potential. If only Daniel could sit still or shut up or stop talking or whatever it is, right? And
or like grandma was saying to you, if only you could just not be a nomad. Like you have so much potential, but you have these wandering feet. You got to stay put if you want to have any success.
Exactly. And I think that it's, if you look at we don't use a phone that was built 4 years ago, dude. Yet we're using this archaic form of education. And not to get too, anti-establishment, because I'm not, but I do believe that a lot of the way it's set up is for you to be a good worker in an office. Like, the same physical setup is similar to an office. You're in a room with a bunch of other people. You got to stay still. You got to do what they tell you. You got to write thing. And it's like, when you look at these other options, because I don't want to dwell too much on that. If that's what you want to do and you feel that's appropriate, go for it. But when you look at these schools, like the Green School, for example, you see these kids, they're 6, 7, and 8, and they're coming up with entrepreneurial ideas of how to I was reading one, I was actually being told by a friend of mine who is in a Montessori school in Ibiza, and she was saying that these kids, basically, they were given I can't remember what it was that was creating a bunch of excess methane. I think it was maybe their compost or something. And they were charged with this, maybe they were charged, or they were even just came up with this idea of how to use this excess methane to make money. These are kids that are 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. And they, because the platform for them is so much more open, you're seeing these really great ideas and these advances and these new ways of thinking. When you chat to a kid, man, they have these left field things. You're like, whoa, dude, how did you come up with that, right? And I don't think we're giving them the most that we can at all. I think that we're, why are we spending all this time on random things that have no, real relevance in modern day times, yet we don't talk to them about their financial freedom or their posture, or the fact that they need to breathe right, or the fact that, there's a million things. I mean, I really think that this next 10 years, you'll see a lot of change within the nomad space, but it will filter out into just general education, I would say. And I think that if you ask me my blue sky thinking how it would work, I think there would be multiple schools that are under the same umbrella around the world, and they are kind of, you can do 1 month in this place or a semester in this place. And what it will allow you to do is be this nomad, but maintain the necessary structure that a kid needs. Because there's no doubt in my mind that just traveling around as a nomad without the structure is also going to be detrimental to the kids. They do need a bit of structure. And so I would love to see this the same way I envisage Noma in, 5 years time, is you could be able to get a Noma passport. So you would be, we would have a minimum 12 locations around the world that you could choose to do 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. And ideally, you could basically travel the world with us. And I would love to be able to have an educational arm in those locations that would allow a kid to maintain his educational rhythm while also getting these unique experiences in different places in the world. So, it's a big ask. I'm not saying that it's something that's easy, but I think that there are already some people on the way. I know that there are like schools that allow you to just do one term, and these parents, these nomadic parents, are just traveling around and picking the schools kind of as they want. And I think the next stage is schools or groups of schools kind of coordinating and offering that to you as a service. So that, okay, I've got my kids' education covered, and I'm doing, 3 months in Europe, 3 months in South America, 3 months in Asia, and 3 months in Africa, for example.
Man, I'm a massive fan of this whole concept. I agree with you 100%. I think it's the next step in this evolution for the exact reasons that you mentioned. All of these nomads are going to have kids, and it's not just like a 21-year-old's backpacker's dream for a year or two anymore. Like, you can actually do this sustainably. And figuring out that education bit is the key. And it'll take innovators like you and like the people at Boundless Life and Green School. We've actually had the founders of Boundless Life and Green School on the podcast before. So if what Daniel was just talking about resonates with you, we'll link to those in the episode here in the show notes. But I really do think that's like a massive opportunity from a business standpoint. And then also just like that's where people are going to want to go naturally. They're going to want to take their families along with them. They're going to want to make sure that their kids aren't, having to sacrifice their educations to do this. And also, man, I think it's such a massive opportunity. Like, we had a guy on the show before. His name's Ken Weary. He's the COO at Hotjar. And he has been traveling for like 7 years, I think, like full time with his two kids and his wife. And his take on it, which I found really fascinating, was like, look at the education they're getting along the way. Like, they wanted to study marine biology one, semester or 1 month or whatever. So they went to Honduras, went to Roatan and did like scuba diving. And like that's how they learned marine biology. And then they were like studying languages over here. And they wanted to, the month that they were spending on Egypt, like they literally went to Egypt and like learned Egyptian history in Egypt. Could you imagine a better I can't imagine somebody arguing against that. So, and then throw in like the social side, right? Like, so we're going to this more distributed model where you're working with people across the world. Like my full-time job, I work with 100 people from 35 different countries. There's a skill set that it takes to be able to interact with people from opposite corners of the world, to problem solve, to communicate, to collaborate, all those things. And those kids are learning how to do that every single day. They're interacting with kids from other parts of the world. They're learning languages, social cues, norms, all those things. So I think there's something like really powerful baked into this whole thing that's sort of not so tangible, but is very, very real.
The ability to see the way the world lives and how vast those differences are, I think if you just take a quick snapshot of the issues we have, societal issues right now, it's so much of it is around the fact that we sit in these echo chambers and we don't get a chance to really see how the other person lives. So when you do get that opportunity, you're afraid, or you don't understand it or whatever. And so I think like that's so much of that is instilled in us in a young age. And so, yeah, having a kid to just see all of that would be, I think will allow them to be a little bit more open to the way the other person lives and to be able to, have different views than someone else and also be able to be friends with them. Like it's okay to disagree. And I mean, and that's just on more of a grandiose, kind of philosophical standpoint. But yeah, why wouldn't you want to go to Egypt if you're going to learn about the Egyptians? Like, you've got one which is like watching some, movie or reading a book, or you've got a guide at the pyramids telling you about it. Like, of course, it's like there's no comparison. And so yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of steps between the two. But I think that like those trailblazers, like the person you mentioned who's doing that, like, they're proving that it's already doable. And so now we just need to put the infrastructure behind that so that like, again, so that we can continue to be the stepping stone for people that want to make that jump, but maybe aren't quite ready. And I think like it leads me into something that I wanted to speak about, which is just goes back to, I think, one of the things that makes Noma so special and makes these trips in general, so special is remote work can be kind of lonely. Like if you're in your room all the time, right, and you're there, it's like it can be really lonely. And so like, not just like lonely in the sense of, right, I don't have any friends around, but even if you go to a new place and you're fully focused on trying to meet new people, it could take you 2 weeks. I remember traveling, you get to a hostel and you'd have an absolute vibe. You instantly meet your crew, you're banging, it's great. But then you go to the other one and you're like, it just doesn't vibe. And and you spend 2 weeks trying to find something, you end up leaving. And it massively affects your experience in that place, and your memories of that place. And so like, if we can, curate these communities of like-minded people who want to meet other people who are in that same boat, like I think that's something that really attracts people to us. And I think that's the part that attracts the kind of traditional or hardened nomads who've been doing this for a long time. They just go, oh, you know what? For a change, I'd love a community. Like I've been doing the solo thing for so long that I want, I was talking to Danesh, who runs the Digital Nomad Nation, I think it's called. I think you've had him on the podcast. So, and he was saying like, that was what he was saying to me about it. He was like, I would come just for that because like I do the other one so much that actually just to go, oh, you know what? I'm going to be in Belize with like 20 people that I know are going to be a vibe. And that's like it's a release. I don't have to worry about that side of the nomad life.
Oh, totally. And, it's a relief. I mean, it's like one of those things it's like going to an all-inclusive, like maybe you don't want to go on a cruise or an all-inclusive all the time. But like in this case, you just, for a month or 2 months or something, or maybe you want to bake it into your like every few months kind of thing. If you're a perpetual nomad, I think there's so much value in just knowing like I'm going to have that part taken care of for me and don't have to figure it out on my own.
Yeah, it's a part that we've spent a lot of time on. That's why we do these vetting calls now. And I think we kind of sit right in the middle of like our competitors. Some of them have like a super long, like 3-month vetting process, and then like others don't have any, and you can just purchase straight online. And we kind of hope that we're sitting right in the middle there. And I think that like a lot of that came from like, I don't necessarily think I think some people are just they're not at the stage for that in their journey. And so that can really negatively affect the overarching kind of feeling of the group. As groups are kind of, they'll move with the energy of the people. You'll have like this like social dynamics so it's really important that everyone is, glass half full and positive and have that go with the flow attitude. But also the one thing that I never thought about, but is super common, is just, it goes back to perspective, only knowing one way that things work. Like things work unbelievably well in America, like way more than they do in most of the world, and maybe Europe as well. But when you leave those areas, you realize like, hey, like, things don't work that well. Like, talking about like never having power cuts, or the fact that the service is slightly different, or the fact that there's bugs, or whatever it is. Like that's stuff that like, if you've traveled, you understand. But if you haven't, you may be surprised. And so in these vetting calls, we kind of just make sure, hey, are you at the right stage of your journey for this? And as I said, we're super open. This isn't like it's not exclusive in that sense. It's just, there's a couple key points. Like, do you have that go with the flow attitude? Do you have a remote work job or some sort of something that you're working on? And like, are you willing to take that jump and be in a group of people that may not have the exact same values as you? I have conversations with people where they're like, like if there's any Republicans, like I'm out. And I'm like, well, that's probably not right for you, because I didn't expect it, but we've had like people who worked on the Trump campaign and also people who worked on the Biden campaign in the same trip, eating at the same dinner together, and they were mates at the end, mate. They were mates at the end because they realized, hey, look, whatever you believe politically, you're never going to believe. Everyone isn't going to believe the same thing all the time. And I don't want to get into that political discussion because that's not my area. I would consider myself a libertarian. I think you should be able to do what you do, and as long as you're not hurting anyone else, you should be able to do that. But it was amazing to see that if those two people who are like the opposite ends of the spectrum can break bread at a table and actually have a conversation that, they didn't agree on everything, of course not, but it was beautiful to see it, because that for me is what we're about. That's what we're trying to do. It's like, hey, there are many different ways, and like, you can live and work and talk and be friends with people that don't necessarily have the exact same views as you the whole way through.
Yeah, I think that's the exact kind of experience. Like that is the far end of the spectrum in a lot of ways. And then in others, you think like, well, I think this is always interesting when you're traveling, especially when you're spending like significant time abroad, is that you end up meeting a lot of people who, if you had stayed home, you would have never crossed paths, or if you did cross paths, nothing would have come of that. But because you find yourself in this like foreign place, you suddenly have you have something in common, something like pretty profound. You're from the same place, or you're not from this place where everybody else, where you're currently sitting. And that suddenly unites people. And it's always been amazing to me. Like, you see friendships formed, and I'm like, if we met back home, we would have like maybe been introduced, and I would have never thought about you again. And now we've become friends over this table here and sipping on sake in Japan or whatever. So it's just like, this is a really cool thing. And I think one of the things, at least for me, like one of the things that's really early on was very addicting to me about experiencing what life is like abroad. I think that's still the case for me today. Like, that's probably my favorite thing, at least from like a community standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I used to say, like, I'm this, I'm like a Democrat, or like, I'm like, I'm like a surfer, or I like, and I think like I've tried to steer away from that now because of basically what you said. It's like, you're just what you've been exposed to so far. That's it. Like, and it's all it is. And it's all stuff you've made up in your head, which can be valid. You can live that if you wanted, but you nailed it. It's like you're suddenly drinking sake with someone who you're like, wow, like I would never have spoken to you. And actually you realize maybe a part of you that you didn't know as well, that's like, connecting with this person. And I think that's beautiful. And I'm a big component of that. And I hope that, that this is the beginning of a little bit more of a reintegration. Like, if you take a macro view on life, right? We came together from the farms, like into the beginning of the industrial era, into the factories, because we had to come together. And then that evolved into the office, which is essentially the extension of the factory, right? And then we have the internet, which is in our lifetime, it's like the light bulb or electricity, right? It's allowed us now to then disperse again. We're going to be able to disperse and maintain connection. And it's like we're given this opportunity to perhaps, have another go at like living a bit, spread apart or in different areas, while now all being connected and learning like, oh, that's the best thing they do in Japan, and this is the best thing they do here. I mean, we're seeing that with general, like when people talk about sustainability, it's like, oh, well, hey, this old technique of using like, mud and clay in this area works really well for insulation, and you don't need ACs. It's like if we can start to cherry pick this information that we're getting from different areas and kind of correlate it together, I think that we stand a chance of doing some really cool things. I really believe that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. It also touches on an idea that, there's a lot of people who push back against like remote work in general, using the basis that like, oh, we're social beings, we need to be connected. The people are going to just get lonely. They're going to sit in their bedrooms in their underwear and work all day and live miserable lives. And I think, that can be true. That is the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario does occur. But what I think they fail to mention is that often we fill that void with something else. And as those options to fill that void continue to become more available and more obvious and more attainable for people, then people will only continue to fill that void even more with more interesting things like Noma, for example. Or it might just be something simple like, oh, I use that extra time. I fill that void with doing community service, or I fill that void with more time with my kid, or whatever it might be, more friends, more, I picked up a hobby, whatever, but we fill that void. And I think the really cool thing is is going to be as people become more sophisticated nomads and as it becomes more of like a norm to do this, people start incorporating things like Noma into their annual plan or into their life as a, just their standard life. And what an awesome way to fill that void. Like, I think that's a path to leading a very fulfilling life for a lot of people that would have otherwise been stifled by having to get in the factory line and go to the office every day. And it's that for me is super exciting to think about that moving to the mainstream.
Yes, I agree. I think that it's just I think that even the remote work jobs are also the beginning of a lot of people becoming more entrepreneurial as well. Like, that's like, I don't even like it's stepping stones again. It's like, okay, well, now I've got the job, I've been doing that. Well, at least and then you start a side hustle. I think there's a lot of talk about that online at the moment of like, hey, like, you don't need, you can make a lot of money like online doing loads of different cool things. And I think like, financial freedom is another area of this business that's really interesting. And we're acutely aware of this. I think that like, there's this, like, we've talked a lot about the personal side of the business and all of the potential pluses and things that you gain from the personal side, your friendships, the freedom and connecting with people and learning new experiences. But I really want this to be a network that people go, hey, man, I come on a trip, but I'm part of Noma because of the value it can give me for my business or my business endeavors as well. The ability to so I'm working on an alumni, I guess like alumni retention is what I'm looking at. It's like, how do we keep people engaged and how do we add value to them, post trip? Because essentially it's still a transactionary nature in a lot of respects. And so like, one of the things that we're looking at is, this network is full of awesome people, right? Already, like, of the 700 people that we've had come through so far, like, we've got everyone from Google, Facebook, we've got YouTubers, we've got, coders, we've got designers, we've got photographers, pretty much anything that you could possibly want. Like, every time I now need or want something and I don't have a connect, I look through the black book and I always find someone. And so I want to make that black book available to everyone. So it's like, what I want to set up is this like wants and needs section for business. So it's like, and for personal. So you can say like, I'm a coder, so I can give, what I offer for work is coding, and what I do in my personal life is surf lessons or guitar, for example. And what I want is, I need a graphic designer and I need guitar lessons, whatever it is, right? And start to be able to automatically connect these people through some sort of app. I'm assuming some sort of app will be where it sits. You could do it manually as well, and then that starts to like create this value network. And I think those network effects are we're not really even touching the surface. Like, it happens naturally. Like on the Buenos Aires trip, we had two guests that work for Publicis. Publicis is a huge advertising company. They didn't know each other. They met, they vibed. They ended up investing together in a startup in Africa, like off conversations. And it actually invested in Noma as well. Like, we had a small friends and family round, and like some alumni got involved. And it just speaks again to like the connections that you can make through this. But we had another company, they did their kind of product test on site, and now they've just launched. They completed their funding, and that's all just stuff that, like, she was coming on a trip. Her name was Victoria, and she was just coming on a trip, and she's made these slippers, and she was just trying them out, like getting everyone to feel them and like touch them and use them, and it was just great to see the trajectory, like from like, hey, like a quick kind of like testing on site to then 5 months later raise the money and the business has started. And I want to be a part of that. I want people to be like coming on a trip with ideas. Maybe in the future we're able to help them with financing or something like that as well. Like, that side of the business is so interesting to me also, because I think if we can connect people with people for their personal lives, and we can connect people with people for their business, like it really will start to become this family, essentially. Like, that's what it is. It's like an extended family or alumni, but without that, like, you need to have gone to a specific school or you need to have a specific prerequisite. I want it to be open to anyone who's able to come and wants to come.
Man, well, I have zero doubt you will do that based on just a little bit of time we got to spend together today. I think the sky's the limit, and it's going to be really exciting to watch, perhaps even participate in for me personally. So I'm sure the audience here is probably pretty enthralled, and I think it'd be a perfect time to share with them where they can kind of follow along and learn more. And also, if you wouldn't mind, I wanted to ask you this earlier, but I forgot to, or we got off on some other rabbit trail. Just some of the upcoming trips that you have, just to like give, we talked about, Belize and Buenos Aires, but I know you've got stuff going on all around the world. So maybe just mention that, where people can follow along, links and such. We'll put all that in the show notes. And then, a little teaser there, what's coming up next for Noma as far as trips go.
Sure. So, it's www.noma-collective.com. That's our website. That's if you want to come on a trip, just click on the Get Started button, and you'll be able to schedule a call with one of our vetting team members, and that'll be a chance for you to get to know a little bit about us. We get to know you, make sure you're a right fit for the trip. And then from there, once you're in the community, you take your time and come on whatever trip you want. You can also check us out on Instagram, Noma Collective HQ. That's probably the best place for the visual content. I think the day in the life videos on the website are a really good way to see kind of what it would actually be like, to be a nomad on these trips. I think in the highlights section as well, you get a bunch of cool content for you to kind of get an idea of what we're doing and kind of the hotels and the excursions and the people and that type of stuff. So trips, yeah. So each trip is picked based on us having a local counterpart there. Someone who understands that area. I think that's really important to us, so that that you don't just get kind of a touristy experience, but you get a unique kind of local experience. So Buenos Aires was obviously number one on our list because apart from the fact that it's really cheap as a place to go to, I have a lot of contacts in that scene. I worked in the music industry there for many years. And so, parties, underground stuff, secret bars, speakeasies, that type of thing, full of museums and just amazing stuff. And then if you're into football, you probably should go to a Boca game as well. And then, Belize is the headquarters. That's where we started. That's most definitely like our number one destination. We spoke a lot about Belize, but the hotel is beautiful. It's a great place to come if you're nature focused. And then we've kind of got some in between. So Buenos Aires being the most kind of city focused, and then Belize being the most nature. And then in the middle we have Bocas del Toro, which is an island in Panama. That's like a great middle ground. The hotel is like in the middle of nature, but with 5-minute walk to like the town. Lots of amazing experiences there: excursions, waterfalls, ATV rides, and then also that they're pretty fun on the party side. So that's like a good mix. It's also proximity to the States is a really good one. Buenos Aires is a little bit further. So what else? Kenya for me is like my favorite trip that we put online so far. The next one that's coming up in March, we're actually doing a collab with a music festival that's happening on site at that time called Kaleidoscope Festival. But Kenya is particularly special because I have a friend of mine, Diane. She was born in Pittsburgh, but she's Cameroonian descent, and she moved to Kenya right before the pandemic and kind of really got installed there and has just amazing connections with the local community. And so I believe we really are able to deliver like a proper experience and also give back in the way that we want. I'm always worried about, it being taken in the wrong way. Obviously we're doing this business in Africa. And so I just want to like say that like we're able to connect and give back and also offer like this beautiful experience in a place called Watamu, which is about 100K north of Mombasa on the coast. And it's an epic 3.5-week trip with a festival, a safari, and if you're lucky, a night on a pirate ship, which was pretty dope. Um, and then we have Bali, obviously a nomad hub. We generally rent out villas there, and we're in Canggu. Lots of fun, lots of wellness, and that's obviously also aiming to the people on the other side of the world. We do notice that people are slightly bound by time zones. So we find that the Americas is our stronghold because our original market was the States, and now that we're branching out into other areas, we see a lot more people from Australia interested in Bali, UK interested in Bali, that type of stuff, just because of the time zones. People don't want to wake up at like midnight to do or be up at midnight doing calls. So yeah, what else do we do? Medellin is the trip that's happening right now. It's another city escape in obviously a beautiful city. I was like almost in between. I was in between Medellin and Buenos Aires when I was looking at places to stay. It's a vibrant city. We're in a neighborhood called Poblado. What else? Antigua in Guatemala. We did that in October, and we'll be doing another one in Q2. And then there are a couple of other ones on the horizon. We're looking to do one in Portugal. We've got one on a Greek island. There are a couple of others that I'm not at liberty to speak about right now, but some really cool stuff. Potentially I guess I can talk about. So there's one potentially in Bulgaria. I really want to mix a ski season with a nomad trip. And so there's a place called Bansko, which my partner actually did a festival in a while back. And we're looking at doing that, but that won't happen until 2024. We're a bit too close for time now. And obviously with the seasons there, it's kind of a tough one. But yeah, and then we're also trying to focus on some alumni-only trips as well. We did one in Mexico last year in Puerto Escondido, and that's just kind of something that we want to do to give back to the alumni, a little bit more emphasis on the community, kind of making sure the fridge is stocked with vegetables and fruits every day, making sure there's a cooler full of beers there for people, giving them a welcome pack that's got like some mezcal if you're in Mexico, and But the idea being that we can kind of add a little extra as a thank you to the nomads that are continually coming on trips for us, and also moving forward, we want to use them to kind of trial out new locations and kind of get feedback on like the new housing and stuff like that, because it is a little bit about trying to find the perfect house or hotel, which kind of, I know we're tough for time right now, but I will leave on this, which is like the long-term plan is to build these purpose-built nomad locations, because there really isn't anything. We're still fitting in. We're kind of fitting in into a hotel, or we're fitting into a big villa, and we do the best we can. And I think that we deliver a great product. But when I think, blue sky thinking, where's this going to be? I imagine this kind of Google office mixed with like a Tulum hotel, where you've got this like beautiful lounge areas, but you've also got this like really nice workspace. I will get a slide from the co-working space into the pool. Like that's what I want. I want that. Everyone should have a slide, in their life. We want to, get back to the inner child. And so like, I really want to build these locations or at least repurpose these locations so that long-term people can have this Noma passport, which is what I mentioned before, where you can essentially travel with us as much or as little as you want. And the biggest kind of movement there, which is kind of one of the things I'm most excited about, is our generation really struggle to get on the property ladder. It's something that is like really tough because of it's not like our parents. My dad bought a house for 20K in London, right? Gone are those days, right? And so we want to, and we will offer the opportunity for our nomads to purchase a stake in the Noma properties around the world. That's what we're moving towards, so that you could have, access to these places, but you can also have basically, use these income generating properties. So it's like, for me, this mixture of experience and equity. Like, can people use these places for the experience and then also get on the property ladder? I think that is something that's really interesting, and we're seeing it in the space in general with companies like Arrived Homes, which is something that Jeff Bezos put a lot of money into, and that here is another one. But what we're not seeing yet is how that model can be based around an existing community, so these people actually get to enjoy and be a part of these locations. Like I want these people to be able to vote on the next locations that we purchase and be like, yes, we want 2 slides, not 1 slide, but
the new version of the homeowners association.
Yeah, exactly. The homeowners association, but yeah, slightly more vibey, I hope.
The Nomoners Association. I don't know. There's something to do there from a marketing standpoint. I do think you're onto something really smart there, though. Just 2 things. Like, one, I think a lot of people associate building wealth with owning property, and it's hard to be a nomad and own property. Things like Arrived Homes are helping, and there's like REITs out there where you can invest in, invest your money in the real estate game without having to like be a property manager and be there on site, because I think that's hard for nomads. And then also the other thing is, like, a lot of nomads, I hear people talking about all the time, they want a home base or 2. They want a place that they're getting some equity in. They feel like they're doing the smart thing financially by investing in something, but they don't want to be like stuck to it either. Like, they want to be able to move around and swing back by and, call it home in some way. And so I think you're hitting on 2 different things there that are pain points yet to be solved, which are pretty exciting, I think.
Yeah. The latter point is really interesting because I've seen it in just traditional real estate in Belize, for example, by where these hotels are opening up residential plots around, and essentially like they are a house that someone's purchased, but they're managed and run by the hotel. So when you want them, you can take it, you use it, and when not, it's kind of brought into the inventory of the hotel. And like, that's the way I imagine it. Like, it's just a nomad hotel, and these nomads get to use this place. And then when they're not there, nomads that are traveling, are able to use those places as well. And it starts to create this kind of like, you've got the vibrant energy from the turnover of people in the hotel, but you've got this like solid community of the people that are there more long term. And that's when you can start to add like a school or the gardens where you can grow your own vegetables, and you start to, have the compost that creates, the food and the gas to like heat your stoves. And I think that if we can nail all of that, then you really start to see these communities that pop up around the world that will allow you to maintain that travel lifestyle, but also feel connected and grounded and have a home, which is also super important. People want that home.
Yeah. There's a lot of purpose in like a sense of stability that comes from having the home that is something you kind of sacrifice when you take up this lifestyle. And I know nobody is going to feel super sorry for the person that's like, oh, I'm traveling around the world and I don't have a home. Poor me. But like, at the same time, like, that is a real thing that I talk to world travelers, all expats, people who are, living their dream life in one way, but they're missing out on an element of life as well. And they're, that's a real thing too. So roll your eyes at it if you want, like, it's but it's true. And I know people feel that way. So it's cool. I love all the innovation that's coming out of this, right? Like, people like yourself and others who are just like building to solve these pain points that are popping up, and they're new, and we're trying to figure it out as we go. And it's just really, really cool to see what's evolving out of the space. I'm a total nerd for it. Obviously, it's why I host a podcast about it. But I love meeting people like yourself who are also passionate about it and actually doing the work to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like, I'm the same. I'm biased because I'm in the space, but I truly believe it's like one of the biggest changes to our world, like, in a long time. And I think it's a change for the better, for your mental health, for your personal life, for your business, for your kids. Like, I don't see many downsides to it. I really don't. Like, I think that, like, there are obviously some pain points, as you said, like loneliness and community and the stepping stones, but I think we're well on the way to solve those. And I think that the next generation, this is what I'm most like fascinated and kind of interested about. The next generation of kids, their ideas, that melting pot. Like, I always say the same thing when we talk. It's like, what people like, what gets you up in the morning about Noma? The melting pot. All those undiscovered ideas of putting these people together. That's the most exciting thing about this. And we have no idea. And I really believe we're just like scratching.
Well, dude, I can't wait to see what comes from it, man. Thank you so much for sharing all this. You were super forthcoming with your time and generous from that regard, and just like sharing a ton of great ideas and about your life and everything. So I thoroughly enjoyed this, man. I know we could go on for hours, but I will let you get back to it. I will and we'll put all those links in the show notes, so anybody that's interested, go check those out. Follow along. I follow all your social handles and absolutely love it. It's awesome content. I'm living vicariously through you guys in a lot of ways. So thanks again,
man. We'll get you on a
man.
trip, mate.
Yeah, I think we'll
get you on a trip.
Yeah,
you need to come to one next year. Let us know around your schedule, and we'll make it happen. You could do some podcasts from paradise.
Yeah, I think that sounds wonderful. Sign me up. We'll touch on that, and I hope the About Abroad community will as well. So you guys check them out and enjoy. And yeah, man, we'll catch up either in real life or again here virtually before too long, I hope. Thanks again.
Yeah, likewise. And just to say, anyone who's interested in anything we spoke about, please feel free to reach out. We have info@noma-collective.com. We're open, and we're open community, and we want to hear from people and their ideas and their stories and everything. We're better together. So let's do it.
Great way to end it, man. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.